What is it with people with disabilities, either physical or emotional? Well, oftentimes when there's a physical disability, there's also an emotional one attached to it. What is it in this story?
Well, I mean, I've always been fascinated in that, I suppose because a lot of the fantasy I read as a kid featured a lot of very perfect heroes, a lot of physically perfect and emotionally very sure of themselves and confident heroes. And I guess I thought people who have fought in a lot of battles are likely to be to some degree maimed or injured or left emotionally or physically very damaged by their experiences. So I wanted my characters to reflect that, and I often have very scarred, very emotionally and physically scarred characters. But I suppose I also thought that, you know, there are people in real life who struggle with disabilities of all kinds constantly, and there would probably be many more so in a medieval style of society, if you like. And many of these characters went on to be very important in one way or another. There were quite a few noted Viking figures who were disabled in one way or another. There's famously a figure called Ivar the Boneless. No one really knows why he was called boneless, but he was supposed to be carried into battle on a shield, so he couldn't walk probably, but he was an extremely powerful and important figure. So there's a good tradition there, I think, and an interesting area to mine. I'm kind of interested in the way in which people who are not perfect, who don't have all the advantages, ways that they can make themselves known, make their presence felt, have a big impact on the world, maybe through means that wouldn't be considered normal in that culture. So I've always been fascinated by those kinds of people, and I feel you don't see enough of them in fantasy, so I wanted to put a few in myself.
Would you consider the main character in a throne kind of like emotionally wounded?
Yeah, I would. You know, his parents died a violent death, like Batman, right? And he's physical exhaustion was a pretty big thing for me. I'm asthmatic. I get winded easily. I was a kind of geeky kid in that way, and so having, as Joe's saying, you know, so often in fight scenes, for instance, it's these gleaming, oiled, well-muscled heroes who you know, swing a sword for, you know, hours without tiring, and I've got a couple characters like that in there, but my main character, exhaustion, physical exhaustion, was a really big thing that I wanted to convey, and so he spends quite a lot of the book physically winded. You know, the fat old guy running up the hill, and you know, he has to stop to catch his breath and is worried that he might get killed while he's doing that, right? And so the toll that a doula kind of represents is both a physical toll, but yeah, certainly an emotional toll, and certainly from a lifetime of kind of seeing people die around him and killing some people, he has, you know, what we'd probably call PTSD now, and is trying to get some distance from that life and some peace, and so that's a big thing. But there are also actually, you know, they're minor characters, but there are physically disabled, traditionally disabled figures in that society, because those figures are also actually very prominent in the Arabian Nights, which is a very big influence on the book. And partially, I think, just because, as Joe's saying, you know, those there was a lot more kind of disability that had no, I don't want to say cure, but that had no, there was no means of dealing with that physical disability, and so many conditions that now, you know, might be treated early on, you know,
like asthma?
Like asthma, or, you know, just yeah, I mean, all sorts of things, and those figures, they're going to be actually a fairly large percentage of the population where people get ill, and that illness leaves a physical mark and leaves a physical toll on the body in a pre-industrial era in a way that it probably doesn't so much today. So the cities in the Arabian Nights are full of one-legged guys or one-eyed women, or, you know, whatever. And so those figures, while they're not necessarily at the center of the novel, they are a lot of Adula's friends. The main character, he's this kind of street guy, and a lot of his friends are have some sort of physical disability of one sort or another.